the French still view animals as just animals, in other words, as objects.
The circus is clearly breaking the law.
We show exactly what's happening here and now in France.
Thank you for joining us for a new edition of France in Focus. I'm Nadia Sharbi, and this week we're looking into animal welfare here in France. You join us here just an hour west of Paris at a shelter for horses and ponies. This is Horizon, a 23-year-old pony who arrived here exactly a year ago. He arrived famished and exhausted after years of exploitation at a riding stable. And such tales of abuse are far from rare here in France. In fact, until 2015, in France, animals had the same legal status as, quote, movable property. In other words, furniture. But while authorities are slow to catch up with France's European neighbours on the issue of animal rights, a number of NGOs and campaign groups have staged increasingly high-profile actions. One of them, L214, made headlines with graphic videos showing the reality of French slaughterhouses and sparking a backlash against the country's meat industry.
Animals crammed together, crying out in fear and pain. Slaughterhouse workers going through the motions as they stand in pools of blood. Death that sometimes comes slowly and painfully. This footage captured in French slaughterhouses shocked the country, but it also put L214 on the map as a leading animal rights group. Founded in 2008, its activities were the first to take on the powerful meat industry. Every day in France, some 3 million animals are slaughtered for food.
I think we've worked very hard, very seriously over the last 10 years. We bring proof. We show exactly what's happening here and now in France. This footage is absolutely outrageous. It's so bad that most people can't watch.
L214, or L214, takes its name from an article of the French Rural Code that recognizes animals as sentient beings. Once just a handful of activists, the organization now counts 60 employees, 2,000 volunteers, and 30,000 members. The group's investigations have had a massive impact, and the images filmed covertly in slaughterhouses or breeding farms have been shared millions of times. Sebastian himself worked 3 months on the slaughter line.
We have two types of informants inside the slaughterhouses. The first are supporters or activists who get hired and go undercover, which is very complicated both psychologically and even from a practical point of view. And then there are the whistleblowers who already work on a site, for example, on an interim contract, and get in touch with us because they're shaken by something they witness and want the general public to know what's going on.
And the group's effective shock tactics mean that L214 is in a position to challenge not only food industry giants, but also elected officials and consumers. And while it wishes there were more political will to address the issue of factory farming, its members feel that thanks to their work, no one in France can claim they didn't know.
Well, for more on this, I went to meet with animal rights lawyer Marie-Bénédicte Desvallons, who's spearheading efforts for France to adopt a new bill of animal rights, and with neurobiologist and philosopher Georges Chapoutier, who specializes in animal issues. Hello to you both. Thank you for being with us.
Hello.
Marie-Bénédicte, let me perhaps start with you. We've just watched a report on the actions of the L214 group. Has there been any legal response to the cruelty that was exposed in those videos?
I'd say it's been a case of one step forwards, two steps back. During the 2017 presidential election, we heard a number of campaign pledges, but then nothing materialized. There was also an official inquiry into the practices of slaughterhouses, but unfortunately, changes aren't mandatory.
Is there much political will to change things here in France?
There is, in a way, spurred on by the actions of civil society or NGOs. I wouldn't really call it political will or awareness, but politicians do now take animal welfare into account, I think, because they see now that it's a real, far-reaching issue.
Now, George, as a scientist, you used to work with animals for experiments. How has France evolved on that particular type of cruelty?
There's been huge progress, and let's be honest, that's thanks to European legislation, which itself is influenced by the bloc's northern countries. When I started my career in research, caring about animal welfare was ridiculed, but now it's seen as a serious and valid issue.
And have French scientists themselves changed their attitude?
There's a sizable minority of scientists who are now interested in the issue, which is great. But of course, the great majority are focused only on their work rather than on animals. But now they respect those who do care about animal welfare.
If I may add something on this issue, unfortunately, when we organized a conference on animal testing and experimentation, we discovered that a number of French laboratories sidestep European and French law by importing animals. They breed animals in countries that care very little about animal welfare, such as China, and then import them into France.
And there's science and then there's cosmetics. These are two different things. Have things changed on the side of cosmetics, or do we still have animal testing in France?
No, that's over. When I talk about research, I mostly mean fundamental research, which is a very complex issue. But regarding cosmetics, I'm glad to say that's over.
Now, as you've both mentioned, France, compared to other countries, including neighbouring countries in Europe, and despite EU legislation, is clearly dragging its feet on the issue of animal welfare. How do you explain that? Is it cultural, perhaps?
I would explain that in two ways. First, there is a very clear cultural and even philosophical reason. Logic rules in France. Philosopher Descartes still has a lot of influence here. As a result, the French still view animals as just animals. In other words, as objects. Then the second reason is that France is very much an agricultural nation, and in such nations, food plays a central role. Here, gastronomy is key. Just think of foie gras, which is a monstrous practice, but continues regardless.
I also think the French aren't good at soul-searching. That's true generally, but especially on this issue. They refuse to change.
Now, Marie-Bénédicte, just a few minutes ago, Georges used the word object to talk about the way the French view animals. And certainly in 2015, there was a change in legislation that meant that all animals went from being viewed as movable property to sentient beings. Did that change come with any real legal protection for animals and also penalties for the perpetrators of animal cruelty?
As far as disciplinary measures are concerned, no. So far, it hasn't changed anything. However, it did spark something of a wake-up call for French society, which in turn led to more awareness. For instance, among judges, who've sometimes been more severe in their sentencing. But unless the media or society throw the spotlight on a case, acts of animal cruelty are often met with very light punishment.
And how hard is it for you to carry this call for a bill of animal rights?
Today, our aim is to deliver a new code of animal rights, in the same way that France now has a green code to protect the environment. So the idea is to establish a legal framework that will give animals a specific status, distinct from that of a person or an object. Because unfortunately, in the human mind, and French minds especially, a person is associated with the biological notion of human life. Saint-Exupéry, the author of The Little Prince, wrote that we bear a lifelong responsibility for those we tame. And I do think that we have obligations, both to act, and that's where you touch upon the notions of good treatment and well-being, and to not act. For instance, to not harm animals who are in the wild, who need to be left with a minimum amount of natural habitat, however much humans proliferate.
And are you seeing a real evolution as far as consumers are concerned?
French consumers are evolving. They eat less meat, and there are more vegetarians and vegans. It's pretty slow progress, but it's continuous, so there's room for optimism.
Marie-Bénédicte Desvallons, Georges Chapoutier, thank you both very much for having talked to us.
Merci.
Well, spending time with these horses is an absolute treat. And of course, getting up close to exotic animals has long been a popular pastime, whether at the zoo or at the circus. But in recent months, a spate of incidents has made the headlines, with animals breaking away from their keepers and ending up shot dead after high-profile pursuits. Boycott calls quickly followed. The law has been slightly tightened, but more importantly, French zoos and circuses are slowly coming round to the idea of rethinking the way they use animals as a form of entertainment. How? Take a look.
Lions, bears,
monkeys, and hundreds of birds. Welcome to Biopark, a zoo on the site of an old quarry where more than 1,200 animals live in relative freedom. The mixed enclosures across 15 hectares seek to recreate the animals' natural habitats.
They have space here and they don't seem unhappy to me.
You can really learn about how the species live in the wild, so to speak. The real behavior of the animals.
There are no animal performances. The only thing on show is the natural world.
As well as entertainment, the park is also about environmental education and scientific research, the conservation of threatened species, both at the zoo and as well as in the countries where these animals come from.
Biopark does not privately own the animals. Over the last 3 decades, it has even released some back into the wild.
We are getting ready to reintroduce macaws in a few months. These very beautiful red-winged macaws will be released in South America.
But not all animals in captivity are so lucky. The advocacy group One Voice is fighting against their exploitation, especially in circuses and sea life centers.
Dumba, a 41-year-old elephant, is in a sorry state. She's extremely skinny. You can see in these pictures she's forced to play football, walk a small dog on a lead. Is an elephant in the savannah walking a dog on a lead?
Dozens of French municipalities have already outlawed the use of wild animals in the circus as public awareness about their welfare continues to grow. After 25 years of running a traditional circus, André Joseph and Sandrine Bouglione decided to stop using animals in their shows 3 years ago.
When the animals come out, it provokes a huge emotion that cannot be replaced. But even without them, there are still plenty of other things that make the circus what it is.
We're a family of artists, and we simply want to continue evolving our art in a different way.
The Bougliones have launched their environmentally conscious eco-cirque with no animal performers and with part of the proceeds donated to animal protection.
And the good news is that after a year here at the centre, Horizon has found a new home and will be leaving in the next few days. And that's all we have time for in this edition of France in Focus. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to France 24.